let's be honest. I'll learn Hebrew someday. It's still someday. Yalla, let's start now. The University of San Francisco's Hebrew SF Summer Ulpan program is a live, immersive Hebrew intensive. Just 3 weeks, 3 hours a day. You'll learn to read, write, and speak using conversation, music, film, guest speakers, and culture in a supportive, high-energy learning community. All levels are welcome, even if you're starting from scratch. Learn more at usfca.edu/HebrewSF. This is Judaism Unbound, episode 532, Announcement! Shabbat Podcasts. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Lex Rofberg.
I'm Rena Yehuda Newman.
And I'm Miriam Turlinchamp.
And today we are thrilled to be diving into an exciting conversation because we're making a big Judaism Unbound announcement. We have some amazing new podcasts coming your way focused around the experience of Shabbat. We are excited as an organization to take Shabbat Unbound, which is a program we've been doing once a month to create deep engagement with the liturgy of Shabbat, and expand it to podcast form, both in a podcast specifically devoted to Shabbat Unbound and in 2 others called Rest to Return and Shabbat Dinner Party. Before we get into that more fully, Shavuot Live is coming up, our biggest annual event. This 7 years strong event called Shavuot Live. We started it in 2020, and this will be our 7th year, is back. It's 24 hours, a festival of Jewish learning and unlearning, taking place in Zoom, featuring teachers from all around the world on all sorts of Jewish topics. It's a true extravaganza of unbound Jewishness, Jewish unboundedness, etc., etc. I love it so much, I tend to stay up for the entire 24 hours. Anyway, Shavuot Live is coming up. You can register by heading to judaismunbound.com/Shavuot. That's SHAVUOT. You want to mark your calendar for May 22nd through May 23rd. We'll spend a lot of time together schmoozing, learning, chatting in the chat, screen sharing, all the wonderfulness of digital Jewish learning for 24 hours. Don't miss it. And now in terms of today's conversation, I'm really jazzed to soak into Shabbat with y'all. We do release our episodes on Friday mornings. We've said this once or twice, but not in a while. That's a very intentional choice of our show, that our episodes come out on Friday mornings specifically, as opposed to some other time in the week. Because from the get-go, when Dan and I launched this thing, our vision was that people who wanted to would be able to listen to Judaism Unbound as a Shabbat practice, that they'd be able to soak into something Jewish. And it hasn't always been like Shabbat-flavored content. And so now we are, in fact, more explicitly, more directly looking to experiment, play with Shabbat in our programming, in our podcast feed, and it's going to be pretty exciting. So, Miriam, I want to start by throwing it to you. What's about to happen in this Judaism Unbound-iverse as we dive into Shabbat programming? And while I've mentioned them briefly in the intro, can you tell us a little bit about these 2 initial forays we are having into Shabbat podcasting?
I'm so excited about taking this next journey, this thematic journey that we're about to do with Judaism Unbound, specifically focusing on the practice of Sabbath. And so one of the ways that we're doing that is to expand our relationship to the podcast as a whole. And we've created 3 new podcasts. We're talking about 2 specifically today. The first project is born from our live event, Shabbat Unbound, that Lex, you and I have been doing together. It's been really magical, I think, as a team to be able to offer this energy out into the world, to gather with 100 people at a time and invoke Shabbat through a really unique lens, which is that we pick one Sabbath liturgic element, so one prayer, and make that the whole service. So we sing it, we study it, we gemar it, which is that we offer collective commentary around it. And thereby we bring in Sabbath through this really concentrated way of focusing on one prayer. And we've decided to transform that into a whole podcast in itself. So it's going to be 8 episodes with song and one prayer for each one. It's Lex and I together offering a drasha, a sermon, or a meaningful way of thinking about the prayer, and then his incredible voice singing all different kinds of music come forward. And so it'll be our very first unique podcast that includes music and study and also a prayerful energy. We've never done anything like that before, but really it came from doing it all with you first.
Yeah, I'm really jazzed about it. And you mentioned this, but just to get at a question I think some people might have, which is, okay, so I've heard about or I've been to Shabbat Unbound, which is your Zoom gathering once a month. Now there's a podcast, fine. So you've like taken that and put it into audio form. That's actually not what this is. There are some podcasts in the world, including some that we've created, where they initially take place as Zoom conversations, and then you sort of splice them into smaller pieces, put some music in, etc., and then it's a podcast. That's not what we did. We had a really fun time. Miriam and I and Joey Taylor, our wonderful producer, and many others, an entire band in Cincinnati, for a number of days recording. We were in a live studio together. We were not just in Zoom rooms, and we spent a lot of hours polishing and creating particular content on each prayer. And the form that took is what ended up being this podcast. And so we have, like Miriam said, these drashes, et cetera. They're not just like, oh, we said them in Zoom and then we put them in a podcast. They're much more than that. And the music, it was so fun to create. And my belief is that this will be a new kind of Judaism Unbound. I don't know if programming is the right word, but like resources, material that we've never really created before. And I'm very proud of what was created. I think the music that will be sort of the tapestry of each episode, it's not just one track, because we have a prayer for healing that we're using musically and some other things. I'm proud of the soundscape that these conversations are going to be, and even calling them conversations. That's the word we have tended to use for this podcast, because we do conversations. And yes, we put a theme song at the beginning that I wrote a long time ago and recorded, but it's not a soundscape. This really is going to be a finished product that you can engage with as a Shabbat service, not just as something you listen to while on your bike ride that's Jewish and interesting, which people have told us they do on Shabbos with our podcast. This will be a different kind of thing.
Yeah, it feels like an offering. And I've been thinking about how we talk often about the artistry of this organization, that all of us are artists. And like quite literally we are. And the three of us all are. And this was what it feels like when I've been listening to the edits of it. I feel like, is this story? Is this song? Is this poetry? Is it a prayer service? I could imagine cutting vegetables for my Sabbath dinner while listening to it and being able to energetically feel like I was bringing something spiritual into that practice in a way that maybe I couldn't if it was just cerebral. And it feels like a wonderful experiment. And we're going to be releasing it once a month on a Friday. So hopefully that'll just energetically bring you into something different in a way that you haven't experienced us doing before.
One of the things that I just want to break in and talk about is the relationship between Shabbos, Shabbat, the Sabbath, and creativity. For me, I'm a visual artist, and we really are a team of artists. And it's one of the things that's coolest about the evolution of where this organization is going, me becoming a podcast co-host, but also the way that our podcasts are expanding, which we will be talking about real soon on this podcast. But thinking about Shabbat is like the perfect doorway for us to be entering into to talk about it, because what is our relationship to Shabbat collectively as a people? It's the day that God stopped creating and said, let's just enjoy what we have. Let's take in the beauty of the world that I've made. Let's see all of the things that are there and just get to really experience the pleasure of it. And so I feel like these Shabbat-related podcasts are actually about getting to take in the pleasure of that creativity and the actual artistry of the experience of creation. There's like a real meta quality to the fact that Shabbat is becoming the meditation or the portal through which Judaism Unbound is entering into this new era, as we are weaving together all of these different kinds of artistry, different kinds of podcast, multimedia, multivocality. And then on the seventh day, maybe you, our listeners, will simply just get to rest and enjoy the creativity that we all are collectively creating.
I think that's an amazing, amazing idea. And it sets the table for our other podcast. Miriam, can you talk to us about Rest to Return, the Kashira Halev Fife production that is becoming part of our family of podcasts?
Absolutely. So Kashiras is very different. Kashira is coming from the lens of being a Kohenet, which is a Jewish priestess. And so Kashira's focus on Sabbath is really centered on being yes and. We are people of the book and people of the land. We are people of the earth and people on the move. I am who I am is my own identity, and we're part of something collective at the same time. And Kashira's orientation is to guide us through this earth, body, spiritual energy in a way to always use Sabbath as an act of returning to who we actually are and who we're supposed to be in the world. So to both return and rest, and for the purpose of reimagining our role in the world. The beauty of Kashira's piece is that it is 7 episodes of song and story and this heart-opening Torah that's really a unique perspective for Judaism Unbound, and we're hoping that we'll receive Sabbath in a really different and intentional way than what we've been offering before.
Yeah, that rest to return name. I mean, I'm known to be interested in titles of things. Like whenever we have guests from some organization on the show, I ask them why they named their thing what they named it. Rest to return is, I don't know, quietly provocative. I don't know if it's quite saying your assumption is that Shabbat is rest, but actually we're taking you from that assumption of rest to return. Maybe there's a bit of that. But I am grateful for that push. I mean, we had a conversation recently with Sophia Freudenstein where we were talking a little bit about our respective Shabbat practices. And she made an argument that for her, it isn't only about rest. And I was struck by that. And I think return, I mean, I don't want to speak for her, but like, I think return is a word that might resonate for her and at least for others for what Shabbat is. There's a way in which, I don't know, musically, I'm thinking about the word rest as a musical term, like, if you're playing a piece and a rest comes, that's a part where you're not playing, right? And the idea that Shabbat is a cessation, it's a not, might feel like it's an incomplete telling of the story. Like rest as sort of non-work or non-action. Return is more of a, it's almost like the part of the music where you hit the tonic, you hit the home note of the chord. And there is a way in which Shabbat is that, right? It's not just a rest. It's something we can rely on each week where we return to a kind of home base. I have fewer rhythmic practices for Sunday or Wednesday or Thursday than I do for Friday night through Saturday morning because the latter is Shabbat and the latter is a kind of practice. Practice is not non-work. Practice is not fully rest. I mean, that you have to be practicing, right? So I guess I'm curious, Miriam, can you talk to us a little bit more about why that name rest to return? It's fine if my thing that I just said is totally wrong. You can give other reasons that you chose that term as well.
Kashira's been leading a retreat called Rest to Return, and it's mostly, as I understand it, an offering to engage deeply in what rest looks like for the purpose of returning to ourselves. I think typically when we think about rest, it's so that we can do more, and that we're then defined by our productivity, and also rest becomes just sort of the thing we do in between producing things in the world. And I believe that Kashira really takes issue with that we don't just think about ourselves as production machines. We are thinking of ourselves as living bodies who live in land, who live on the move. We are not just in one place, and that we are resting as a countercultural offering, not just so that we can not be defined by what we do in the world, but also because we have to remember who we are. And this act of resting is the spaciousness to say, actually, who am I in this place? What am I doing about it? And what can I offer it?
I love that idea. And it really makes me think about a really classic Talmudic argument or set of questions, which is about what is the purpose of Shabbat? And does Shabbat exist for the week, or does the week exist for Shabbat? And in the time of the Romans, right, when the Jews are under Roman occupation and the Romans go up to them and say, you guys are so lazy. Every 7 days, you sleep, you stop working. And the Jews said, no. It's not that we're lazy. It's that when we have Shabbat, we're better workers during the week. It's almost like a sort of apologism about Shabbat of like, it sets us up in order to rest so that we'll be better workers. And then there's all of this argument that happens for the hundreds and thousands of years that come after that of, well, do we have Shabbat so that we can better serve the week? Or do we have the week so that we are better prepared for the rest of Shabbat? And it's interesting because when we zoom out at this particular moment.
Sorry, the rest of Shabbat. Like a listener could mishear that as the rest of Shabbat, as opposed to like the rest that is contained in Shabbat. So I just wanted to clarify. That's gorgeous.
That's exactly right. And when we zoom out to the time that it is on the Jewish calendar, the year 5786, let's say, this is the 6th millennium before we're headed into the 7th. It's like Friday afternoon on the clock of the world. And now I'm not saying necessarily from a creationist standpoint that the world is only 6,000 years. Perhaps the years in God's time are much longer. We can draw out about that in many different poetic ways. But the notion that the world is entering into a huge transition and that here we are on Friday afternoon of the world, we're like inside of that twilight period. We've got like 300 more years before it gets to 6,000, right? And then we're in the 7th millennium, if we really want to think about these cycles big picture. And there's not actually one moment that Shabbos comes in. We live in a world where we can like Google Chabad.com Shabbos candlelighting times, right? And we have the exact minute when we look at our digitized or analog clocks. But for a really long time, the transition between the week and Shabbat was actually this really beautiful and amorphous no man's land of time as Shabbat entered. And I think it's actually in that ambiguity, in that really beautiful in-between space, that we can actually maybe start adjusting what our relationship to Shabbat is. It's not as binary as it once was. And that there's almost this third relationship that we can choose. That's not, does Shabbat exist for the week? Or does the week exist for Shabbat? But it's the way that Shabbat is considered to be a taste of the world to come. It says in the Gemara, it says in rabbinic commentaries that Shabbat is 1/60th of the world to come. And if we're practicing that for the world to come, if we're practicing the experience of getting to have Shabbat not just once a week, but all the time, it actually makes sense that we should start understanding that we can enrich all of the weekday with the consciousness of Shabbat, and that the revelation of holiness inside of the week is what will ultimately make Shabbat even holier. And so from that point, I want to talk about, Miriam, what's happening with our feed, going beyond simply a Friday-oriented podcast into something that might shoot out into many days beyond just Friday.
I love that, Rena Yehuda. I was also thinking when you were talking, I feel like the work of starting Shabbat is such a pain. And even just like the work of trying to calm down, right? So that I won't worry about laundry, I do all the laundry. So that I won't worry about cleaning everything gets cleaned. So that my family feels like they can have a nurturing, beautiful dinner, like I cook and then I shop. And so Friday kind of sucks, like building up to it. There's this energy, and sometimes I find myself delaying the beginning of it so I can start. And then I feel like that's sort of like vacation time too. Clean your inbox, make sure your out of office is on. All the work of the taste is a lot. So I just want to hold that too, that resting, just like the Messianic era or whatever's coming next or possibility, takes a lot of work. And that work, I think, requires different habits, behaviors, and mindsets in order to work into. And something that Kashira, I think, does is lets us think about the largesse of that work, the work of the self and the work of the body. And maybe you don't have to like Miriam it on a Friday. Maybe you can actually just slip into it. I think the way that Rena Yehuda, you described this like loving Shabbat. And
but let me just clarify real quick. I don't experience entering into Shabbat that way. It's the craziest rush. And just noticing that, like, that's also the time that it is on the clock of the world as things get crazier and frankly worse. I really appreciate this question that you're asking of what would it be to slip into that.
I want that. And so maybe the slipping into it is part of what we're doing with this podcast feed, extending it beyond that. Sometimes we can't just binge out on our rest and our like beautiful cerebral little spiritual life that we're doing. We have to have little morsels offered to us. And so one of the beautiful things that is happening, and it's a risk we're taking with you and as part of our team, but also with all of our listeners on this journey, is to say the voice of Judaism Unbound was never two people. It was always all of us together. And to harness that unbounder energy by reminding us that there are stories and voices that can only be heard through their lens and through their unique expressions and identities. So what that's going to look like is on Monday, you'll get a podcast. On Wednesday, you'll get a podcast. And on Friday, you'll get some podcasts. And in the beginning, it'll feel like, okay, there's a lot in my feed, swipe, swipe, swipe. But you also might be able to hear a voice or a story that you never would have heard otherwise. And hopefully that it unlocks something, maybe a 1/60th of a something that lets you see the world with new eyes. And our goal is to talk about all of these things through the many different modalities that exist, and also to watch two people who could just hog the mic actually choose to say, actually, all of us are part of this, and we want Unbounder voices to be central to what we're doing in this work.
Y'all, I'm revved up. This is very exciting hearing the two of you drosh on this, talk about it. I couldn't agree more about the magic of sort of the particular two launching points, Shabbat Unbound and Rest to Return, that are instigating this feed shift. And I also couldn't agree more about the excitement of the feed shift itself. I wanted to dwell a little. I always want to dwell more in Shabbat. That's like the aspiration we all have, right? I wanted to dwell particularly in a teaching that we receive very regularly, but we might not notice, which is from the prayer of Vishamru. And I apologize to Kashira if this is a teaching of hers that's in the podcast already, but if it is, then this is a fun sneak preview. The last two words, Shavat vayinafash. So you have this whole Vishamru prayer, which is about Shabbat. It's saying basically the Jewish people should keep Shabbat, et cetera, et cetera. It talks about kind of some practicals. What is Shabbat? Then it closes and it says, Uvayom hashvi'i, on the seventh day, Shavat vayinafash. And that basically breaks down. Shavat is basically rest, take a breath, sit. It's actually the root is lashevet, like to sit. Take a seat, take a rest. Vayinafash is a really hard word to translate. I think it gets very deeply to this idea that, Miriam, you were bringing in Kashira's name around how Shabbat is a kind of return to who we are. It's built on the word nefesh, which is sort of, each one of us has a nefesh. Each one of us has an identity, it's often translated soul. Vayinafash, you hear the nafash part. That is a verb of the word nefesh. I don't know how to translate that, like to ensoul oneself, to soulify. What if we understood Shabbat not only as that shavat part, the rest, but also as vayinafash, as ensouling ourselves, returning to that which we are, nefesh. I'll save the conversation for another day about whether each of us really is sort of an eternal identity, or whether we might want to understand ourselves as part of a broader whole as well. But I think that's powerful, that vayinafash, in its very language, is calling on us to do that return towards whatever it is our innerness is, our soul, however we want to translate that.
Lex, I want to add real quick that there's a practice that I do whenever I sing Vishamru or whenever I say it, that when I get to that word vayinafash, I really sit on the shin at the end. I really say Shabbat vayinafash. And it's like a way of actually trying to sit in that experience.
So love it.
It's like, I feel like it's, it reminds me of the Shema, which always calls me to attention, and trying to pick out what are those moments that, you, our dear listeners, or, that you, Lex and Miriam, use to take that extra space to experience coming back in, or like feeling yourself being, as you said, ensouled. Lex, Miriam, let's give the listeners a taste of what Vishamru from a Shabbat Unbound lens sounds like.
Yeah, and let's do the one Lex wrote.
Here it is.
Veshameru B'nai Israel את השבת לעשות, את השבת לדורותם בריד עולם. ביני ובין בני ישראל, אותי לעולם, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות, את השבת לדורותם בריד עולם. כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות, את השבת לדורותם בריד עולם. וביום השביעי שבת וינפש, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות, את השבת לדורותם בריד עולם. So I do hope that that felt meaningful. I'm excited to continue the thread not only about the particulars of Rest to Return and Shabbat Unbound, but about this broader feed shift. And for that, I want us to talk not just about the place of Shabbat, but I don't know, is everything else we do the whole, the rest of the week? We'll have to figure out the right verbiage for the rest of our programming, the rest of our podcasts. But we have a family of podcasts already. It's got some children, some cousins, some uncles, some aunts. We've got a number of members of this family of podcasts, Tales of the Unbound, Oral Talmud, and now these additional podcasts, Door to Door. So we're making moves organizationally to, as the two of you have said, be multivocal, to have different voices, literally, as part of this feed, and not only literally, to broaden our work to more thoroughly feature a lot of people who are not just our staff. And so that feels worth naming, and it feels like an important piece of this conversation, which is we're expanding this podcast feed, and it's part of a trajectory of the last few years that is worth talking about. Rena Yehuda, you started your staff role with us by being the director of our certificate program in Unbound Judaism, which you still are, and you recently also became co-host of our flagship podcast. The certificate program in Unbound Judaism is part of this trajectory of multivocality. We are certifying people who are not us to carry out our name in the world. And it's been very fun so far. We also started a Discord server about a year ago. It just hit its year anniversary. Shouts to Brian Lister, our incredible Discord moderator. And there's hundreds of people there every day participating in conversations about all sorts of Judaism Unbound things and occasionally sharing pictures of their pets as well. There's concrete ways we're trying to do this across our organization. And because our listeners in potential could be part of that, I want to emphasize it. I want to do a call out to all of you to say, this collaborative effort is not just sort of, more voices on the podcast that we're curating and recording and stuff, but also beyond that. So Miriam, Rena Yehuda, can the two of you talk a little bit about this broader shift that's underway and to some degree how it's manifesting through the podcast feed, but also beyond it?
I think there's a unique power in what we do in the world here at Judaism Unbound, and a role that we'll play both in the current moment and also the emerging world. And to think through what our place in that is. And when I first started, I thought that we were the tent in the middle of the wilderness where people could come and get what they needed and then return back to their own paths. And our job was basically like a way station. And then I thought, well, no, maybe we're that place like on the backpacking trail where you go and get all the goods you need and, your family sends you gummy bears and then you can go and build your own little village someplace, but we weren't moving with them. And now I know two things. One is that what we do best is a bridge between the current world, the established world, organizational world, institutional world, and the world that is forming and storming and will be. I still believe that we are not just a singular path. Like you're not going to just going to find us someplace, that we do belong in the wilderness and also in these sort of straddling of multiple worlds at the same time. And you really can't build that or do that well if you're only following your unique vision. But I do think the best way to do it is to stand strongly in the place that you serve. We're a place that doesn't make big declarations about what you should believe or how you should do things, both politically and Jewishly in all kinds of ways. What we say is the tent is very big, the table is broadly set, and that the way that we can engage with this is to be exposed to other ways of seeing things and to see those things as clearly ways to act Jewishly in the world. I think one of the reasons we started with Shabbat is because it's a behavior, a practice, a way of being, a consciousness that often has a lot of thou shalts or thou shalt nots. And there's ways that you do things and ways that you don't. And that it belongs to institutional Judaism or to a certain line of thinking and ways of being. And our way of engaging with Shabbat is to say, actually, there's so many ways to tell this story. There's so many ways to engage with these behaviors. Here's the toolbox. You have the agency and do it. And I think that the way that we're expanding this in the podcast, in the yeshiva, with the classes, with Discord, is to say, hey, we really meant it when we said this belongs to all of us. We're a part of a larger movement. We are one cog in that particular wheel. And our job is to inspire both the cerebral energies of all that and also the heart and practice of it. And that we have to do that with all Unbounders.
Amen. Amen. One of the things I'm thinking so much about as we're expanding the vision of who and what Judaism Unbound is about the fact that we are like a many-wicked Havdalah candle. And this is a moment where as we're expanding out our offerings and we are figuring out what our path forward is in a way that's about being responsive to the needs and desires of the Unbounder community, in a way that is interested in following and platforming many of the teachers and the many voices that have served us and taught many of the students that we have in the Yeshiva and the certificate program. And as we honor the robust voices that are our staff and team, which have this very public platform, but are not the only voices that constitute what Judaism Unbound as a concept, as an organization is, we're weaving together many strands. And so when I say it's a Havdalah candle, I'm talking about the candle that's used at the end of Shabbat, traditionally speaking, that has many different wicks that are woven together into oftentimes very intricate patterns. And it's almost like we're creating a Havdalah candle of Havdalah candles. There's the Havdalah candle of Shabbat, which has multiple strands of the Shabbat Unbound podcast. We have Rest to Return. We also have the Shabbat Dinner Party podcast, which we're going to talk about soon. We've got all of these different strands, including, by the way, a Shabbat book that will be coming out at some point in the future, which we're all very excited about, and is another artistic work that goes beyond the musical and podcasting work that we've done into publication. We're weaving together all of these threads into a Shabbat Havdalah candle. And the next Havdalah candle is the multi-artistic Havdalah candle. We're moving beyond an organization that is simply about podcast-based conversations, and it's starting to be about music. It's starting to be about visual arts. It's starting to be about publication. And who knows where we'll go from there. And then beyond that, I would say the third final Havdalah candle is really truly about our multivocality. It's not just two guys talking into a mic anymore. It's many different voices from our community who are going to have opportunities to speak on a podcast feed that is not only one day a week, but many. We are going to have all kinds of opportunities for people to teach and learn through the Yeshiva in not just 8-week courses, but 3-week courses. We have our certificate program students who are now turning into alumni and leading all kinds of incredible Unbound activities outside the boundaries of even official activities that we've quote unquote certified through Judaism Unbound. And then we have the broader Unbounder community who we hear from you on our social media. We talk to you via email. We hear incredible things about all of the doings that you're doing and connecting with each other democratically through our Discord. All of these different strands are the directions that Judaism Unbound is going, and how beautiful it is to use this as a Havdalah candle of Havdalah candles as we separate the era of Judaism Unbound that brought us to this moment and enter into this new era, into this new week, so to speak, of Judaism Unbound.
Ooh, I'm flashing to like biology class when I learned about DNA, and there's like the double helix formation thing. Feels like there's like a triple helix, at least maybe a quadruple helix. Like the Havdalah candle, I've never, for some reason, I was brought there. But the interweaving wicks, the interweaving helixes is very powerful, and I think it's totally spot on. I sometimes ask myself, what are the wicks? What are the wicks of a Havdalah candle? At my summer camp growing up, there was this funny ritual where every week there'd be 2 challahs on all the different Shabbat tables, and it's a tradition to have 2 challahs, not just one. And the camp would ask, why are there 2 chalot? And there'd be a new reason every week, and it'd be some 2 that arose over the course of that week that the camp director said, this week, the 2 is in honor of this counselor and that counselor. I don't know, like whatever the thing was. And I think with Havdalah, maybe it's worth doing that same exercise in a given week. What are the interweaving wicks? Like we've made the drash. I think the easy drash is like, yes, a Havdalah candle interweaves multiple threads, but what are the threads? I think on one level, you're interweaving the week, like the 6 days that are not Shabbat, and Shabbat. But if you've got a Havdalah candle with more than 2 interweaving wicks, that's not everything. And so I love that organizationally we would understand ourselves as a Havdalah candle of Havdalah candles, where we've got each strand, each thread of what we do being distinct, being visible, because there's beautiful candles in the world that are just one candle, right? But when you bring a Havdalah candle, it's maintaining the specificity of each wick, while at the same time, it's one candle, right? You've got whatever colors of the different wicks all mixed together. And I think that's what we're striving for. We shouldn't make the mistake, I think, of saying we're already there. We are in a process of multivocalityification. We are in that's like the longest word I've ever said on this podcast. It's not a word. We're in a process where we are forging, where we are instantiating a reality where it is true to say we are hundreds, thousands of us. I don't want to be like that Arrested Development episode where one of the characters goes, there's dozens of us, dozens. I want us to understand that we are truly a movement, and we've made strides there, but truly we're doing so much more over the next few years. And that's where the feed comes in. And that's what I'm excited about.
I think, Lex, there's that energy around you. The first rule of a movement is not to say you're a movement. And so there's all this thing of like, does it end? Does it start? What do we look at? And to understand that we're in the messy pieces of this, of trying to figure that out. I love Rena Yehuda's idea of being a Havdalah candle or being a Havdalah candle of Havdalah candles, in that allows us to sort of backward design it. I think if you can think about what your Shabbat or your Sabbath looks like when it's successful, you have to sort of skip to the end. What do I need to feel like? What do I need it to know that I nailed this one? And what do I need to do to know that I, didn't give myself what I needed or didn't give my family what I needed? I think it's true here with this organization that we know we want to be expansive. And the pain points of being expansive and inclusive means you have to have people you don't agree with. It means that you have to try things and fail at them. We have to really walk the talk of experimentation. And as we're doing the opposite of Marie Kondoing right now. Right now we're like hoarding, right? Like, give me the stories, baby. Like, let me build this whole thing. And at the end of it, we might find, okay, it was a lot. And what do we do with it? Like, now can we order this? And I think we also might find it was just enough. And we also might find, let's get more. And maybe that's also one of the multi-stranded beads that we're sort of threading at this moment, or candles that we're building, is testing what it means to lean into this vision of what we're doing and sort of take action. And I don't know that we've had an opportunity really to do that yet.
I think my closing note about the Havdalah candle of Havdalah candles is that fire is a really great metaphor here. Not just because I think we are a team and community of fiery personalities, but because I also think that fire is a really beautiful part of the Unbounder mission, to continue having something that burns brightly, that gives people something that they can see, that helps lead the path forward. And like flame, it multiplies and does not diminish when it is taken from its source.
Eish tamid tukar al hamizbeach lo tichbeh. There's this famous quote. I mean, it's not as famous as I'd like, actually. But there's this idea of an eternal flame, Eish tamid, the eternal fire that is on the altar will not be extinguished. That's a hope. That's not necessarily automatic. It has proven true. The Eish Tamid, the eternal flame of whatever it is that this Jewish civilization is still kicking a few thousand years after that Eish Tamid idea was written down in the book of Leviticus. So we're doing well there. I absolutely believe that embodying that fire element is of the utmost importance for us organizationally. And in that spirit, let's close with a little bit more Shabbat. Miriam, you were saying we have a lot. There's even one more Shabbat offering that's going to be coming up in the future that we don't have time to fully go into today. But Shabbat Dinner Party, that's an offering we're going to have. And Shabbat Dinner famously begins with two beautiful flames. We've talked about Havdalah candles at the end of Shabbat. We have talked less about the two flames at the beginning of Shabbat, about that Shabbat dinner on a Friday night. Miriam, as a little taste so that all of our listeners come away wanting more, tell us what Shabbat Dinner Party is going to be.
Sure. So for quick context, Shabbat Unbound will join our feed in May. Rest Return will join our feed in June. Oral Talmud will join our feed also in June. And then Shabbat Dinner Party will come to us in August. The Shabbat Dinner Party is produced by Kate Mishkin, who is a producer out in LA. Shabbat Dinner Party is one person's exploration for personal practice. And the way that she's doing this is to create basically a variety show. She's interviewing specialists, comedians, there's musicians, there's all different kinds of people in her exploration of what does it mean to actually practice Sabbath in a meaningful way. And what she offers us in this really joyful, creative, different kind of podcast is a beginner's mind to Sabbath. What does it actually mean to pick up these practices? What are the things in the way of it? What are the questions I have with it? And that it sort of allows us an opportunity to engage holistically together in beginner's mind Sabbath practice.
And we're really hoping that all of these different podcasts coming out at different times in the week can really culminate in this Havdalah moment where we all hold our hands up to the fire. And ideally, the flame of all of these incredible Judaism Unbound podcasts from our new multivocal family of different sounds and different voices will act as a real fiery reflection, and they will reflect off of the hands and the doings and the makings of all of you, our great Unbound community.
Judaism Unbound. We pray with fire. We play with fire. We're firebenders. I don't know the tagline. There's many options here, but we are ready to get fiery with all of you on our podcast feed, in our programmatic work, in our increasingly multivocal Judaism Unboundiverse. That's what we're going to be hoping to do. It's a start right now. We're igniting to keep with the fire. We are igniting, we're kindling this new stage. Ooh, kindling's fun because that's also a device that people can use to engage with Judaism Unbound materials. But we're kindling a new era via some Shabbat podcasts. Maybe that's ironic because we're making fire, we're kindling via Shabbat, a moment that people associate with not making fire, other than the before and after. But maybe it's not. Maybe it's perfect because Judaism Unbound is precisely as Davka the place where we play with that which is Jewishly traditional and that which is Jewishly untraditional. And we find ways to bring it all together. So I'm excited for the fiery magic that we're going to be creating together. We are going to close out this episode. And as we do so, this time more than ever, we're calling out to all of you to be in touch because the whole point of this podcast and of this moment, this shift that we're inaugurating, is that we need more voices. We have many of you who have been recipients of Judaism Unbound's sound waves, but we haven't always received yours. And that's not me chiding you. I understand that in a podcast format, it's kind of the understanding that one direction does the talking and the other receives. We want to receive. So please, now more than ever, be in touch with us via email. Our email addresses are lex@judaismunbound.com, Miriam@judaismunbound.com, and Rena Yehuda, RenaYehuda @judaismunbound.com. We'd love for you to send us messages on Facebook or Instagram. Head to our website, check out the different things we're doing, come to our Zoom gatherings. There's so much on the docket in this Judaism Unbound world, and we really want you to find your niche within it. We don't need you to do everything. Miriam mentioned there's a lot, but we do need you. We actually, the Jewish people collectively and the world need you to find that niche of yours, to find that unique Torah that you can bring not only to our organization, but maybe through our organization to the broader world. And so we can't wait for that to happen. We need your participation in order to build the Jewish and broader world that we need. So please do that. As you do, know that there are some mini courses in the Onion Yeshiva that begin very soon that allow some of those on-ramps, allow some of those entryways into the Judaism Unboundiverse. You can learn more about those at judaismunbound.com/classes. Financial aid is available for all of them, as is always the case in our Onion Yeshiva courses. And if that's not your speed, be on our email list, join it, and be on the lookout when there is a moment where you're called. And it's Davka, it's specifically you that has Torah to offer that event. So thank you so much for listening. We're so revved up about the Shabbat programming to come and the broader Judaism Unbound world that we're creating together. A final note before we go, we are so grateful as we launch this new programming, as we expand the multiverse of Judaism Unbound programming. If you are able to support us financially, you can head to judaismunbound.com/donate and give a gift on either a monthly recurring basis or via a one-time gift. It really means a huge amount to us, even if the donation you give is a small amount. Just showing that you're excited about this Shabbat programming, that you're interested in seeing more of it, that you're interested in supporting the growth of our work generally, it goes a long way, both in the dollars and in the sentiment. So thank you so much for that. And again, you can donate at judaismunbound.com/donate. And with that, this has been Judaism Unbound.